Good morning. I have the great pleasure today of interviewing Tim Collins from HSBC, who works in upstate New York. Before we, Tim, get into the actual interview, professional part of the interview, our listeners are always interested in how your background and where you grew up and your market area and how you got into business. Did you sell cars before you got in, or go to college?
Actually, John, I've been doing this now been actually in the mortgage end of the business for about 8.5 years. Prior to that, for about 1.5 years, I did sell real estate with one of the local firms, and prior to that, I worked in the R&D department at a engineering firm here in the Buffalo area.
Did you go to school in the local area, or did you go outside?
No, I went to school in the local area. Actually, born and raised in the Buffalo area. Went to school here at the State University of New York at Buffalo in the engineering department, actually.
Yesterday, I was interviewing one of your cohorts, and who actually, Gary Owens, who actually was a computer man, got his degree in computer engineering, and then never used it.
Yeah, we seem to come from a little bit everywhere.
Well, I think that's why there's a lot of interest in people's background, because people do not necessarily focus in on this business. A lot of them are happy accidents. It's ironic. You're the first person I've interviewed in a long time that actually had a real estate background. I did too. I worked for what is now the second largest real estate company in the country, Long & Foster, and I was a top agent in the company and got into mortgage banking by an accident, and that background really proved very valuable for me, and I guess that'll kind of lead me into my first question. It's a good transition, and that is, when you were in real estate, did you find that background helped you when you got in?
Well, I found it very helpful. I think it's always nice to know what your customers go through as you get into a mortgage or into a real estate transaction. It's helped, especially with a lot of the first-time buyers that I've met, to be able to maybe help them and kind of explain to them as to what they're going to be going through over the next month or 2 month period.
I found that it gave me a lot of credibility with agents, because when I started out, and you said you've been in the business about 8.5 years, when I started in the early 70s, I was young and looked young, and you know what that's like getting in this business. And I found that having the real estate background, and more particularly having the awards and working with a good company, really gave me a sense of credibility in talking to those realtors, that you could relate, and I could sell them on the fact that I could understand a sales contract and help them close deals.
I think it definitely opened up a lot of doors for me when I first got into the mortgage end, because as you had said, you tend to have a little bit of recognition from some of the fellow people that were out there, some of the realtors that you had done some business with. And though I'd only been in the business for a little over a year, about 18 months I think was the total, I had done fairly well, and did fairly well actually on a couple of very difficult deals that I got some recognition for with the people that I worked with and some of the managers in the offices in the area.
Let me ask you, when you we're going to bounce back to when you started off, but just for the record, what kind of volumes did you do in 99 and 98, just generally, and the type of loans?
Most of my business is more on the lower end. Most of the deals that I get, I seem to average probably around the $90,000 area for a loan amount. In 1988, I was listed in the top 200, in the Mortgage Originators magazine.
Could I ask you something with regard to that? I know that 90,000. One of the interesting things up there is that your loan volumes are so low that if you were to translate that into some of the other areas of the country, like California and Northern Virginia, you'd be producing a prodigious amount of volume. The amount of loans that you all do up in that area, at least the people I've interviewed, is really phenomenal. And it's a hard business to start with, no matter what kind of loan amount you're doing. But I think it's particularly merit-worthy that you all can crank the kind of numbers that you do up there.
I think the market up in this area is really pretty much on the depressed side. We unfortunately have been losing a lot of our manufacturing base in this area, and a lot of the sales prices of the houses have been unfortunately depreciating instead of appreciating, as the rest of the country seems to be doing to us. But it's more, we do crank out an awful lot of numbers here at this office. We've got a lot of good people, and I think the support that we have from both our management as well as from our processing side allows us to push these kind of numbers out, because you can get a deal in and out quickly, and people in the real estate community and with builders know that.
Yeah, there's very few offices or clusters. There's clusters of companies like Crestar that have 20 people in the top 200. That's very unusual, obviously. But you're kind of a unique cluster there, because you have 4 or 5 people that are in that top 200 working at that one office, and nor that it's a good office, obviously, and a real good company. But it really is a credit, I think, to the management team, too, not only the loan officers up there.
We've got a bunch of good, honest people. I think that's the key thing, is that we have very good knowledge amongst our loan officers. We've got a lot of good young kids here that are, you'll be interviewing years down the road, I'm sure. And we just have a lot of good people here that are integrity in this office is amazing as well, the competitiveness that really pushes everybody to that next level.
Normally I wouldn't kind of jump to that kind of topic so early in an interview, but nonetheless, you kind of dictate the pace of it. Let's talk about integrity a little bit, because it's a subject that I rarely cover. It's one of those things that kind of is in the background, but we do, and kind of as a sidelight to that, if you've noticed in the papers, I know down the Washington area it's been very prominent that the National Association of Mortgage Brokers is pushing very hard, and with cooperation of the MBA and Freddie and Fannie, on licensing brokers. And the reason they want to do the self-regulation is, obviously they don't want Congress sticking their nose in it, which is fine. But also they recognize that there are some brokers and companies out there that really, particularly the high-interest lenders, and that really are not operating in an ethical manner. And I think we are a business where your reputation is everything out in the field, but also you need that integrity of an office. And I just wonder, maybe this is a long question to get into it, but I wonder if you talk about that a little bit. I think our listeners would be very interested in that, especially the managers.
Well, I do a little bit of the training here myself, some of the loan officers, and I think the big thing that I try and impress upon everybody is, first of all, you deal with people the way you want to be dealt with. And there's no reason that anybody in this profession should be unhonest. It's something that is going to come back and haunt you. It's going to come back to haunt your coworkers, and it's not needed. And from the processors all the way through upper management here, the utmost thing that everybody tries to do is we always look out for the customer to see that he's getting the absolute best possible deal that can be done. And in an area, as sure as everybody's familiar with, in a market where rates are constantly fluctuating, you see too many people trying to take advantage of some of the rate differences, maybe to make a little more commission or a little more for the company. We certainly don't do that here. We give the customer absolutely the best possible thing that we can always give them, as honestly and as quickly as we can. And I think all the loan officers I know, myself, and I know everybody that I deal directly with, that we strive to give the customer absolutely everything, but the best possible thing that customer can get from anywhere that he looks in business.
I find this interesting. I caution people somewhere in my interviews that I'm not interested in discussing anything that's proprietary to your company, but I find this kind of interesting. I'm sure your company would very much like to get this kind of feedback since it's unsolicited. And I do think there is a point to be said for companies that do operate, and certainly the great majority do, but you need to operate in an ethical manner. I can certainly remember in the old days, before there wasn't as much paperwork and everything, where you get a package together and there might be a signature or two that you had left off and something, and without getting into it, it magically got cured and appeared and everything. And those are the things that can come back to certainly haunt you.
There's no doubt about that. And I think it's just a lot of it just has to do with people just not doing the work completely. I mean, it takes you as long to do something wrong as it does to do it right. And when you're dealing with a customer that's going through the process of purchasing a home, and especially here in the New York State area where you're dealing with the attorneys, and there's a lot of doubt and question in the back of their mind as to who's trying to put the screws to them. As you know, you get told so many times that they just, through the process of buying a home, after dealing with the realtor, after dealing with the attorneys and the seller's attorneys, is that there's a lot of mistrust that's being built up. And I feel that a lot of times when a customer leaves our office here with any of our loan officers and myself definitely, is that the customer feels that there is at least one person that they can trust on the whole thing. And I found through the years of doing business that 4 or 5 years down the road, I'll have customers be calling me back looking for advice as to what they can do about maybe a problem that they have with their home or that they have with their attorney. And it's nice to know that they call you to trust you, that you can do that.
Well, I think that's just another version of what goes around comes around, and that if you treat people properly and treat your clients properly, and the attorneys you deal with and the realtors you deal with, it can't fail but to come back to you in a positive way. And I'm not necessarily talking monetarily in terms of getting referrals. I think it's a good way to live your life without sounding too corny.
There's no doubt about that. And the interesting thing is that you can list so many friends that you've made from being customers, and people that you now keep in touch with more on a personal basis, more so than a business relationship.
Yeah, I agree.
It's an awful lot of fun.
Yeah. Let's kind of bounce back to when you were starting off. A lot of the new loan officers who will be listening to this, especially those that are struggling and having a bit of a hard time, I always find that's an interesting topic to talk about the early days when you were starting off and what you did to grab that measure of success, which you obviously have now. So why don't we bounce back and when you started, did you, for example, go after realtors, CPAs, attorneys? How did you get your business? And maybe some stories that didn't go so well for you, when you were starting.
Almost strictly, I went after realtors. I started out working in our more rural areas. Obviously, as being a new kid on board, they're not going to give you the queen of the offshore immediately. So I started out working out in the sticks, so to speak, calling on realtors. And the first year that I was in business, one of the small firms that did quite a bit of business down in the southern tier area would have anywhere up to 100-some transactions during the year. I did 82 of those deals. I had 91% of their business.
Wow.
In the first year that I did business, and I still keep in touch with those people. The main thing that I've done ever since getting into this business was I set time aside weekly, to call on my offices to make sure that they see me every single week, if not once, maybe twice. And Thursdays is my traditional pastry run, where I take pastries out to most of my offices and see them. And it's amazing the amount of people that wait for you, that expect you. If you're not there, they call to see if you're okay.
You've become a habit.
It really has, and these offices that I do call on do have their own brokers built in-house to their firms.
Well, we'll get into that later, for sure.
And it's kind of aggravating to those people that I get 50 to 60% of their business when they do have in-house brokers. But it's just a matter of consistently keeping your face out there. That pulls you through the bad times and certainly helps you grow out greater in the good times.
But how did you get business when you started? Because first off, did you have any formal training, or it was, like most of us, they give you the book and give you somebody to tag along and, off you go?
I managed, when I started, and how I got involved with this company was when I was selling real estate, I had referred most of my business over to the people here because they did a very, very good job. Ended up being the week of Thanksgiving, I was invited to a function that the bank was holding, got in conversation with, at that time, the president of the company, David Hunter, who offered me employment. And I started 2 weeks later. And came on board. At that time, it was a small refinance boom going on, and pretty much walked in my first day. They pointed at a desk, gave me some pens, pads, pencils, and says, "There's the phone." And that's how I started. But from having that real estate background, and that was back prior to the days before the state stepped in and pretty much restricted how realtors nowadays can deal with the customers in regards to financing or asking questions in regards to financing, I was always able to finance my customers or get the financial questions out of the way so that I could qualify them for a loan, prior to me even sending them to the bank, so that when I did go out and show them houses, I knew where their payment would be, how much cash they needed, and what they'd qualify for. And I just kind of carried that right over, and even in the first month of business, I did fairly well for myself here in the company, and just continued on. I just believe in, my father always taught me that work as hard as you can, put 110% out every day, and all will be well.
Did you work very hard by your measure when you started off? I mean, was that one of the keys to your success, the perseverance? And
Oh yeah, very much perseverance. I don't let anything. I don't take no for an answer. If I'm the first of all, I'm not going to turn a deal in if I don't think it's a worthwhile deal. And nowadays with the electronic underwriting that you can do, you can get that answer done quickly. But back then, I always thought that the deals had merit. I believe that the customers were telling me the truth when I would ask them the questions, and I would always push and pursue a deal, even if it was way outside of maybe what I should have been doing as a rookie at that time, but I would continue to push and wouldn't accept no for an answer until I got the deals put through, and continue to do so. And all the people that I deal with, acknowledge that, if it's a hard deal, that I'm going to do absolutely everything to get it through. But I think I firmly believe you have to stay totally in front of all your customers at all times, whether that be attorneys, CPAs, and or realtors. You have to stay in constant contact with these people.
Mm-hmm. When you were calling on realtors, did you started off? Were you hitting like 20 offices and then narrowing it down to ones that you felt you could get deals? How specifically did you go about getting these realtors?
Started out actually with about a dozen offices that were pretty much located in two central areas. So each pocket would maybe have 5 or 6 offices together. So it was actually a fairly easy tour of duty, so to speak. It wasn't unusual back when I first started to put, upwards of 500-600 miles on my car per week calling on these offices.
Wow.
And working 68 hours a week to do it. Certainly doesn't create the best situations always at home by working that hard, but with the understanding of everybody, you're able to do it. And I think the first year I was in business, I believe I put over 40,000 miles on my car.
Wow. That's huge.
And just starting out, obviously did not have a brand new vehicle, so that car didn't last more than that year.
Been there, done that.
Yep, that's for sure.
In your market area, were you doing VAs, FHAs, or were you doing conforming loans?
In the beginning, most of it was VAs and FHAs because of the areas that I was calling on. More out in rural. I was dealing mostly with a lot of people that did not have a lot of cash available to them to work with. So it was mostly a government loan that I was going to write, which was good because that's usually a little bit tougher loan. And if you're going to learn something, you may as well learn with the hard stuff.
Right, absolutely. And of course, in those days, there were no laptop computers, so everything was being done by hand.
Correct.
Did you have a beeper or a cell phone? Well, not a cell phone back then, but do you have a beeper?
I always had a pager, and I always did have a mobile phone. Yeah, you're right. It was not a cell phone. It was, about the size of a phone book that you put on the front seat.
Oh, sure.
I always had one of those.
And they were pretty expensive back then, too.
They were, and I just kept looking at it that it was the cost of doing business. You didn't necessarily want to have that big bill with you, but you needed to do that. And even to this day, all my customers have all my home phone numbers. They have my business phone, my portable phone, my pagers. If a customer needs to reach me, they know they can reach me.
When did you know that you were going to make it in this business? How long did it take? 6 months, a year? Did you ever think of getting out?
It was less than a year that I knew that I could do well in this business and enjoy it. Worked with some great people. I've met some tremendous people through the years doing business. I knew right away that this could work. Within the first couple of months, I was having a lot of fun. I was putting some money in my pocket, paying the bills, and it worked. And certainly, as hopefully will continue to do so. And haven't really looked to get out of the business. I've had a few opportunities presented to me to leave the business. Haven't exercised any of those options, and really haven't looked to get out of this.
How about I'd like to talk about a couple subjects that are near to my heart. They're not necessarily comfortable subjects to talk about, but I think in view of as a training vehicle for those listeners out there, I wonder if you talk about how you handle rejection, because it is a rejection business, and also how you handle stress in this business, because there is a lot of stress in this business.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Rejection and stress are two of the unfortunate evils that are associated with. In the rejection standpoint, I'm not one that likes to get rejected. Obviously, as any of us, any in a sales business, do not like to get rejected. I feel that for...
you ever take it personally?
Pardon me?
You ever take it personally?
I always take it personally. That's the only way to me anyways, that's the only way that you can overcome it, because it may have been something that I did wrong lose a deal or to get a no from somebody. If it's rate based and generally in this area it isn't, I can understand that. But if I get a rejection, I just get two acceptances out of it and just push even harder.
Mm-hmm. What about stress? This is a stress business. You got a home life. The hours can be insane, and more importantly, this is a business of managing problems. And it's the old saying: "You're only as good as your last deal." And when something crashes in this business, because there's so much on the line, you got a moving van on the way. Things get very serious very quick. And I just wonder how do you try and handle that?
The stress in it is certainly not easy, and it's I think harder on those around us, those that love us, than it is maybe on ourselves. I think our family takes it a lot harder than we do when Dad isn't home or Mom, if that be the case, isn't home in time for dinner or for whatever function. And I think the big thing is being very open with family and spouses. To know that they know what your job is and that they know how long it takes you maybe sometimes to work and get a deal done. From the stress point here in the office, I try not to let it bother me too much, and I just try to realize that if something does go wrong with a transaction somewhere during the day, it's not going to lengthen the time of my workday, because my workday is done when I'm over with it. So I just look at it that if it takes an extra hour or two to get something accomplished, if you have a problem at a closing, you need to run docs around or whatever has to happen, it's not lengthening my day because my day doesn't have a set time period. Mm-hmm. And I just try and put myself in the people's position as to, if I think it's stressful for me, what is it for them? And this way it makes it a little bit easier for myself, and it makes me feel a little bit better, especially when you can get be a big hand in getting it cured.
Mm-hmm. In looking back, you started, you say, 8.5 years ago approximately. How has the business changed? And by that is just maybe a prompt or two in terms of pricing, in terms of loyalty, and also in terms of the way you generate your business. Have you shifted away from realtors to some degree and gotten, as someone said a couple of days ago, outside the box and working with attorneys and CPAs? How has that transition taken place in your personal life?
Well,
I mean, professional, of course.
Business has evolved itself as I think the realtors are tending to play a little bit smaller role in this whole business than they did years ago. Mm-hmm. Obviously, because of the advent of the various for sale by owner outlets that are available in each and every market, as well as a lot of people just doing things themselves, marketing themselves. Certainly, the internet and the various advantages in the electronic advances we've had in electronic media to help people sell homes has certainly taken some people out of the business. Myself, I feel that in it more because of the time that I've spent, more because of the contacts I've made, I do get much more referral base coming from attorneys and CPAs and very specific contractors. But I've never lost touch with the realtors that I've done business with. I've shifted areas. I don't call as much on the rural areas anymore. I do call more around my home area is where my offices are now located. Mm-hmm. But those people are still very, very important to my business, and those are the last people that I'm going to let go. I don't have a problem driving 150 miles to get a $40,000 deal.
Well, okay.
I mean, that's my work day. And $1 is always more than none. And I don't have a problem with that, and I don't feel that I've left any of those people. I think, if anything, my core business is my realtors. That core has stayed the same. All I've done is develop around it.
Don't you think that's kind of interesting if you were to kind of look at yourself in the mirror with regard to that statement? I think there's applicability here for those loan officers out there who want to do everything the easy way, who want things close, and that's not the way our business is. There are times we have to not only work late, but you got to work on Saturdays and Sundays, days you don't want, have to travel enormous distances sometimes to meet a client. It's just part of our business, and either you got to do the deal or you got to get out of the business.
Oh, exactly. So I've taken a mortgage at my home Christmas morning. That was a neighbor. I've taken deals. I actually took a deal during Thanksgiving dinner when the gentleman's wife was preparing dinner.
That's putting yourself on the sword.
I think she wanted to, but that was when the customer needed to be met. And they are the customer. I am not the customer. So one of the things that I try and emphasize to people around here is that if your customer wants you to meet them at their house at 9 o'clock at night, that's when you meet with the customer. They're the ones that are making your money, and they're the ones that should be dealt with and treated as if they are the customer. And it's amazing that how many people do comment that, oh, you'll actually come to my house? I don't have to take time off from work? And you feel like telling them, why should you lose money so I can make money? That doesn't make sense.
I like that phrase. That's a good one. When you're dealing with realtors, I'd like to talk a little bit about the psyche of realtors and how hard it has become, and I think it's kind of universally acknowledged that it's much more difficult dealing with realtors today. First off, there's not the same sense of loyalty. Now they have to give out 3 names. In the old days, they could just steer it to their buddy. And also with the rise of the internet and the fact that a lot of these prospective purchasers coming into the realtor, they're already fairly educated and have already started to search out rates and other vehicles. And so my question to you is, in that environment, how do you deal with your realtors in that, it's just not the same as it was 10 years ago?
No, it's not, definitely. Some of the big offices that I deal with, and almost every office has a sales or a listing board that you can always take a look and see who is doing the business, so you know who to contact. My core of realtors, I think their customers are probably 90% loyal to me. I seem to get about 90% of their deals, irregardless of the pressures that may have been mounted on to them. They do definitely give all their customers 2 or 3 cards. You always hear the customers say that, but I think the strength of our organization here and the strength of our reputation, not just from our sales side, from our processing side, but has kept most of our people extremely loyal with us. And I don't have a problem with, if I look at a listing board or sales board, I know all these people, they're all my friends, to come up and say, hey, where'd this person go to and why? And if you find out that the answer to the question why is because of something that somebody may have offered them differently than we're going to, then maybe you have to step back and take a look from a corporate level and see how we can adjust that so that doesn't happen again.
I like that a lot. You're the first one that has raised that one. It's not a typical question that I would ask, but I think there's a gem here from a sales standpoint, and being able to go to the realtor and ask him why you didn't get a deal, in a very positive manner. I mean, realtors do not like, in-your-face type stuff, but I think that kind of feedback is very valuable.
Well, I think it's important, and I would expect it if I was in their shoes. If I was fairly loyal to somebody and somebody went somewhere else, I have no problem telling somebody why something was done, whether it be good or bad. Certainly don't do it to insult anybody, but if there's a reason that you're not getting a business because of the way somebody may have done business with a previous customer and or because something that you may have done to them, it's certainly better to know why than not to. Unfortunately, I've had situations where a realtor tells me, well, you didn't give this customer this, or this customer needed to get a little bit of money back at closing and you wouldn't do it. No, that's not the way business is done. It's not ethical. I'm not going to do it, and I will never do it. And if you can't bring your business to me because of me being honest and you not, life's tough. I'll go find somebody else. And I don't have a problem telling somebody that, and unfortunately have had to do so.
That gets a little bit into pricing. I always like to talk about pricing, and the reason I particularly like to talk about it is because the listeners out there, especially the new people and even some of the ones that have been around a long time, they get fixated on pricing. And so I wonder if you talk a little bit about pricing, and not so much with respect to your company per se and whether they have a great price on a 5-1 or whatever, but the effective pricing out there in the marketplace. Do you find that it's a very tight market, that you have to be very competitive, you have to cut a commission,
Pricing in our market up here in upstate New York is very competitive. There's really 3 or 4 big players in this area, and everybody is usually fairly close to each other in rates. Have I had to cut commission to get a deal? Definitely. There's no doubt about that. I don't always have a problem doing that.
Sure.
To get the business in the door, that's not an issue. I have also at the same time originated many deals where I was higher priced. And one instance in Remember, I was talking to another person that was in sales, and it was a fairly good-sized deal. It was a jumbo loan. We were priced over by 1/8, maybe to 1/4. And the gentleman came right out and asked me, he says, "Your price higher, why should I deal with you?" And I straight told him, I says, "Because you'd be dealing with me." And I got the deal. And I've told people on several occasions, you're not going to buy a Cadillac for the price of a Yugo. And if you want the best, you sometimes do have to pay for it. If we are priced a little bit on the high side on a certain product, that's sometimes the cost that you pay for expertise and professionalism and the all-around service that you're going to get from us.
I think the point there is that for those listeners out there is that you really have to sell yourself and you have to sell your company. They have to believe that there's value added, and that's a term that a lot of loan officers they've never heard that word, value added. Where is that? But in business, it's the core of a business, and it's the core of a company's success. Because if you can't bring value in any step of the process, then you're not going to have a company. In the same way, I think when you're dealing with realtors and with people, prospects out there, that you have to bring value, and value is not necessarily just price. It's a hard lesson for people that are new in this business. It's a real hard lesson.
No, that's very true, John. I mean, you and I, when we go out and shop for something, it's not always the price that leads you to that specific item. You need to know what you're buying. It's obviously very easy to find when you're buying something that's right off the shelf, right in front of you. You can see what the product is made of, what materials are in it, how long it's going to stay in there and be with you if you buy this product. But when you're buying a mortgage from someone, you don't have that ability to see exactly what 15 years down the road, what is my return on this investment that I'm getting from this person. In the company here, we provide an awful lot of ancillary services to the customer that are above and beyond the mortgage, with the accounts that a customer can set up and the prices or the lack of prices on those accounts for the person, so he can see that right up front. But also try to explain to the person, and I think they can see by us going out of the way to meet with them where they need to, or that they can call me at midnight if they need to, is that they know that over the next couple of months, this is going to be a very trying period for them in buying their house. They're going to have an awful lot of questions. They're going to have maybe an awful lot of running around to do. You're certainly not doing it by yourself. Your spouse is going to be asking you a bunch of questions, and for them to have that little bit of peace of mind to know that they're going to get the right answers, they're going to get them quickly, you're there for them, I think helps out, and I think that's a huge value added to somebody. Yeah,
and that's what I'm taking from your comments, that it is a value added business. It's a service business, and if you can't provide service, and service sometimes means taking a loan app at 11 in the evening, or taking a loan app on a Sunday, if you cannot provide that service to the client and to the realtor, you're not going to be in business very long.
That's very true. You have to, especially in this market as competitive it is, and now the fact that most families are two-income families, if not 2.5 incomes, some people working more than one job, you can't expect them to take time off to meet with you. You have to go take the business to them, and I find it to be enjoyable. I get out of the office, I get to see what people's homes are like, I get to meet their families. It's enjoyable, and I don't have a problem doing that at all.
Yeah. To tie that particular bow together, let's talk about a phenomenon that's risen in the last 5 or 6 years, and I think it's going to get more pronounced as more alliances are made in businesses, and that is the in-house loan officer. When you're talking about a service level, I mean, one of the reasons that some of the in-house loan officers do well, and not everywhere, but is the fact that they're there all the time. Once again, offering service, and if you're not going to be able to be there, how are you going to get the business?
That's very true.
How do you compete against them? I guess is where I'm headed here.
In the offices where they do have the in-house loan officers, I compete with them. It's more from a reputation standpoint that tends to precede me, and I sometimes feel sorry for some of these people that when there's a meeting or an office presentation going on by this loan officer, I always just kind of happen to pop in during that time, and 40 to 50% of the people walk out of the presentation, come over and talk to me.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Well, you got to put the little twist into it every once in a while. And the thing that I find is that the offices that I go to is when they do have an in-house loan officer, those people definitely know who I am and recognize who I am, and it's nice to walk in and watch people walk away from me. You kind of feel sorry for them a little bit, but they chose to work where they chose, not me. And it's my reputation always precedes myself on a deal, and the effectiveness that we get a job done. Most of these people, they have the in-house loan officers. Obviously, they're a broker, they're not a banker. And I always tell the customer, I says, you didn't ask your neighbor to go find your house. Why are you asking somebody else to go find your mortgage?
Mm-hmm.
And people tend to remember that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, there is the flip side to that argument, and the flip side being that a broker, and it's a constant argument. This is nothing that we'll resolve here, but the flip side is that the broker can always get a better price because they're looking for that unique product and everything. I think there's something to be said for both sides.
Well, in some cases they certainly can, and if that be the situation why I'm meeting with a customer, I never have a problem saying, when you spoke to so-and-so beforehand, they offered you this product. I can't offer that to you. Maybe this product is better off for you, and you should maybe pursue that. But if you do have any questions at all in the meantime, please still feel free to give me a call. And that happens, obviously, in certain instances when somebody's offering some sort of hybrid-type loan that I cannot offer them. And it is amazing that almost up to closing, the customer will still call me, even though I didn't write the loan, just for advice. And then I'll find 2 or 3 months later they'll refer a brother or sister over to me.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you have? You were talking about how you've built a well-earned and hard reputation over the years. These things don't come easy. But what advice would you give to the new loan officer that's been in business less than a year that has to get out in that same environment and compete against you? What advice would you give them to compete against you?
Don't. No.
Yeah, but beyond that, come on, cough it up.
I think the big thing that I recommend to anybody that I train and anybody that I meet is a couple things. One, it takes you as long to do it right as it does to do it wrong. So be very efficient in every piece of paperwork that you complete and fill out, because a month or two down the road, if you have to access that loan and look for information, you're not going to specifically remember what a customer may have told you. Make sure you have notes on everything that you do talk about and on every situation. Make sure you document absolutely everything that you can. Secondly, the customer is the customer. We've all heard the old saying, the customer is always right. Even if they're not right, they need to think that they are, and you need to always try and work out a situation so that they're very comfortable with the answer that they've given. May not be the answer that they wanted, but you always try and make them feel that they are comfortable with that answer so that you don't have any policy with that. And also, and the key thing is to be accessible. If somebody needs to reach you, if a realtor needs to reach you, an attorney needs to reach you, you just can't leave an office phone number. That doesn't work nowadays. I'm rarely in my office. You have to be able to have them reach you absolutely anywhere. I actually have 2 portable phones just in case. I have the pager, I have 2 home phones, and they're all on my business card, including my email address. So if somebody needs to reach me, I know that they can, they know that they can. Mm-hmm. And that makes everybody feel just a lot more comfortable. And lastly, treat people as you want to be treated. Be honest to them just as you want people to be honest to you, and that'll all come back.
It's funny. I just as I was thinking of a war story for myself. I think that has applicability here, and that is I remember years ago when I was in the business. I can't remember how many years I've been in the business. I do remember I was at a movie theater in Northern Virginia watching the movie Coma. And in those days, the beepers were not sophisticated. There were no liquid displays. You could get a high beep or you could get a low beep, and the high beep you set aside for your family, and the low beep was for a client. Then you call into your service and get the number. It was a big pain at that time. But I'll never forget, in terms of accessibility, when I knew that was a valuable tool when I got beat 2 times in the middle of Coma, which was a pretty suspenseful movie. Went, damn, got up, went out, put my quarter in the thing, or a dime, whatever it was back then, and called. And after the second call, I'd walked back in, and I had made $900. Mm-hmm. In the process of watching a movie. And the reason is that they were calling. They had people there. They wanted a quote. I gave them the quote, and they said fine, and made the appointment and went back to the movie. And, it was like $900, and it was just an incredible thing to me that here it is, this little stinking beeper that you paid about $200 a year for, made me $900 in an hour.
great little investments. If you could get a return on equity and anything else nowadays, except for an internet stock.
Right, the internal rate of return on that's pretty high. Obviously, you're a pretty busy person, and you're very accessible. And that, of course, leads to something that I think is very important for even the old veterans out there, and that is, how do you specifically manage your time? You've mentioned the fact that you have a couple cell phones and a couple beepers, but beyond that, in terms of processing loans and support help, and do you set aside days to do certain things? How do you manage your time to raise your productivity?
I guess my average work weeks are probably 60 plus hours. I try and get into the office between 7:30 every morning, and usually the first hour or so in the morning I'll go through my pipeline, take a look and make sure that all the dates are still doing fairly good. If I know a customer is getting ready to close in 2 weeks, and I try and stay in touch with my customers as much as possible, I'll go through the file, make sure that everything is ready to go so that there are no little hiccups happening. Luckily, we're blessed here with a very good processing staff that supports us tremendously. From the standpoint, I hear a lot of other loan officers cry all the time about how much time they have to process a loan. Really don't have to do that here because we have a real good group of people. And I also know that the package that I put together when I handed it in is pretty much a loan that's ready to be authorized to close as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
During the week, I put specific times out I block off my schedule specifically to go meet with customers.
You do.
To go meet with my realtors. I stay in very close contact with my attorneys and CPAs through a networking group that I'm in, but as well as on a personal basis, I make sure that I stay in touch with everybody, whether it be out golfing, going to a ball game, whatever can be done. I make sure that I put that aside so that those people are met. And it's important because they feel important. It creates some great relationships and a lot of fun, and makes time go by.
When you manage your blocks of time like that, do you find that there's times when you just have to break it, when there's just calls coming in? I mean, is it hard to maintain this kind of time management?
Not when it becomes as much of a schedule as if you've been doing it for 8.5, 9 years. As I said, on Thursday mornings, pastry morning, I've been doing that for 8.5 years. It's now my time. That it's a nice time for me to kind of relax and blow off. There are times, obviously, a meeting or something may interfere with that, and sometimes if that be the case, I actually have the pastries delivered to some of the offices. People get a kick out of that, but it's my way of them knowing that I was there, even if I wasn't.
Yeah, I think I'm going to read between the lines here and make the point that you didn't, and that is that while you have to be flexible and you have to give this incredibly high level of service, you also have to control the deal. You have to control that client from start to end and control that realtor. Otherwise, it just all kind of frays at the seams and flies apart.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I mean, I think you have to be in a position to make the call at all times. And I don't know if it's strictly a control type of thing, but ultimately I think they always know that you're the one it's your board, it's your game. And it's a little bit easier to enter into a transaction or enter into a deal with somebody when those rules kind of already been laid out before them.
Another comment that I would make too is that about 8.5, 9 years have passed since you got into the business, and I think this is probably not too much of a problem anymore, but realtors can be, at least this is John Ondrich's opinion, a very controlling group. And, there's an old saying about, what heads down the wall, the barn door. And realtors, in my experience when I was younger, starting off, they really kind of looked down on loan officers, and at the same time they needed them. And it always kind of struck me how, maybe cruel is too deep a word to use, but how realtors can be very insensitive to loan officers and casually throw deals around and not call you back and That always bothered me when I was young. As you get older, you learn to control that situation, and I just wonder if you would comment on that a little bit. Yeah, you're an old pro now, so it's not a problem, but maybe address this towards the younger people out there.
You had to throw that word old in, didn't you, John?
Yeah, right. Well, I'm a lot older than you, I'll tell you that. How old are you anyway?
I'm going to be 41.
Oh, yeah. Geez, I sell my soul for it.
Yeah. There are a lot of people that you do tend to deal with that are exactly the way that you've kind of described them. I've got a builder specifically that I do some business with, as well as one of my realtors that I do an awful lot of business with, appears that way. And when I get those deals from that people, or when I get a customer that deals with those people, first of all, I always tell my customer how great I think the realtor or builder is that they're working with. That usually gets back to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I tend to even push that to a little higher level when I'm dealing with somebody that's very difficult. But I think the key thing that I always also do when I deal with some of those specific people is I have I don't want to say a team, but it is a specific group of people that is put together that are only going to handle their transaction, whether that be the appraiser, the bank attorney, the processor, but it's the same people every single time. So if you do have a very difficult customer to deal with or a very demanding customer to deal with, it's the same people that are playing with them, so that they know exactly that that customer needs to be really kissed up to a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I found one of the builders that I have is just exactly that way. It's very, very difficult to deal with, but everybody acknowledges it now, and we find that the deals are going smoother and smoother, and this person now actually is a dream to work with. I get 90% of his business. It's higher-end homes. It's great, but it was just because I paid specific attention to make sure that every one of her or his needs were met, and that there was no complications or problems coming up.
I'd like to switch subjects on you a little bit here and talk about a group of people that you just mentioned in passing, and that is CPAs and attorneys. I always like to talk about how people can originate deals, as someone said, outside of the box. And how do you go about getting business from CPAs in particular, attorneys, and any other group? You said you were in a group of marketing people, or?
I'm in a networking group for professionals. I feel that's very, very important for anybody who wants to be in this business long term.
Good point.
Is to be either in a networking group or join your local chamber of commerce, get involved in meetings in the town, the Boy Scouts. I find all of that is a tremendous way to interact with people. People don't want to deal with you if they don't like you, nor if you're not doing a good job. But you have to be out in front of people. People have so much more of a comfort level, especially in everybody's busy lives, to deal with somebody that they can see, that they know it's going to get done properly. A couple attorney firms I get an awful lot of referrals from because we do a very good job with them, but also they know that they see me, they meet me, they know me, I'm accessible to them.
Do you go to settlements?
Pardon me?
Do you go to your settlements?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I have gone to a few on occasion, but no, I generally do not, though an awful lot of times I will send cards or something out to the closing attorneys to give to the customer at the closing.
Okay.
As my way of them knowing that I'm there. But actually that's something I thought about doing is starting to go to a few more closings. Unfortunately, in the New York State, the Western New York area, closing is a 3 or 4 hour deal.
Oh, it is. Mm-hmm.
It's not you wish it was nice, quick, and smooth, but it's not. And so it is tough, obviously, if you're closing 20 deals a month to put away that much time to do that and still be effective, because next month you're not going to close.
Do you have escrow agents up there, or settlement attorneys do most of the business?
Attorneys.
Attorneys exclusively?
Pardon me?
Exclusively?
Exclusively.
Mm-hmm.
Though some of the bank attorneys that we do have here are very flexible also. Those are some of the people I get some good referrals from that actually will go to a customer's home and or builder's office to do a closing. Again, that's taking the customer service to the customer. And that has been a tremendous help for me in opening a few doors when I've needed them open. The CPAs, obviously, there's a couple CPAs that I do some work with that do a very fine job, and if I can, I'll refer a customer over to them if possible. I have no problem giving somebody a card, giving a customer a card to somebody that I know does a very efficient job, because that just helps that customer out even further
How did you develop that business, the CPAs and by extension, the certified financial planners? How did you go about getting business from them?
It more, I think, became part of some of the people that I had done business with, some of the CPAs that I would have some work done with, or financial advisor that I myself would do my personal work with. And if it worked, we'd create a little group there. But in other cases, I think if you're dealing with somebody who may be self-employed, and to help that customer out, to call their financial person and say, geez, I need tax returns for Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. If you have them, could you fax them over, and/or I'd be happy to come and pick them up from you. And a lot of times, if I deal with one or two deals with a specific financial advisor, next time I'll do something, I'll send them on a card. Maybe I'll put in some baseball tickets or a car wash coupon or something to them, thanking them for how quick they were able to get the information to me. And people just tend to remember these little thank you cards and these little notes that you send out.
They do. In the talks that I've had with and during the interviews, it's amazing the little things that prove to be effective. One of the ones that keeps coming up, and I have a couple of interviews coming up where I've already been told that they use this technique a lot, is the magnetic cards and signs that you can put on your ice box. It is so small, it's something you wouldn't even think about. And I was interviewing somebody down in the Northern Virginia area not too long ago, and she was telling me she gets an incredible amount of business by giving these things out where that name is in front of them.
Well, I think that's the key thing is having your name constantly in front of them. I do it through desk calendars or desk blotters where my name's on it. If a realtor is not at her desk and somebody calls in, she gets a call, she's talking to a customer, she'll say, well, you can call, there's his number again. I have upwards of 500 desk calendars printed up a year. I give them to my customers. I mail them out to people. If I go to my doctor's office, I throw a couple in there. They tend to be everywhere, and it's amazing that you finally do meet with a customer and say, boy, I've heard your name from a couple of people. Yeah, it's because I've thrown these cards out everywhere, and you tend to see them, and it's just having your name and number constantly in front of them that I think eventually does kind of blend in.
Well, you say eventually, from people that have stuff on grocery carts and Safeway and Giant and some of the other stores, some of these things are very hard to measure. But the fact of the matter is, if you do it enough and you keep handing those cards out, and this is my point to our listeners out there, if you keep doing these things do come back in their totality in getting the number of calls and the number of deals from doing what seems like very simplistic things. You don't always have to be very high-tech to get business.
No, you definitely do not. I mean, the more that your name and business can be seen, company can be seen, the more it's assimilated into everybody's personal business. I race on weekends as a hobby. I have a race car, and I've sponsored race cars for a couple of years, and I get anywhere from 10 to 15 deals a year out of that.
Really? Mm-hmm. What kind of cars do you race?
I drag race. I have a 65 Nova and also have a 48 Austin.
Wow.
And it's a lot of fun. It's a good group of people, but the amount of business that you obtain out of it is phenomenal.
I think that's a point there, too, that these groups, whether you're in a soccer group or, as you say, in a racing group or in a marketing group or whatever, it's a question of networking through the community, and not only that, letting them know what you do for a living.
Exactly. The good thing about this company is you have fun working here. You have a lot of fun, but you're proud of your job. You're proud of where you work. And if people see that in you, that you are happy where you're working, that you are proud of your whole situation, they know that you've done something right. They're going to feel comfortable with you.
Right.
And I think that's a big thing of getting your name out in front of people, just showing that pride.
Right, exactly. Well, look, I think I've taken enough of your time here. We're about out of time. I wanted to thank you very much for taking your time, Tim, to talk to everybody, listeners out there, and certainly appreciate it.
Well, John, I want to thank you for the availability to do so, and it was very enjoyable.